Hello, Kobe.
Hey, what's going on?
Just making sure you can hear me.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, so I guess I want this to be very laid back, not like the Grid Live wrap up that we do. Like there's no script. As long as you come prepared to answer questions, you're good. I just want to start, normally I get to know my guests a little bit better at the start. And full disclosure for everybody watching or listening, like I'm still in my work shirt. I didn't get to see, I watched, I think the first stage of a truck race. It's all I got to see. And the timeline for me is like half the people on my timeline seem to think it was the greatest race ever. And the other half was just moaning and groaning when they announced that they're coming back next year and doing it all over again. So that didn't give me a good idea of how I would have felt about the race had I watched it. So I'm sure I'm going to get a chance to look it over at some point. But just before we get too far into it here, I just was curious what you thought of the race.
Well, I thought the race had its ups and its downs. There were parts about it that I really liked and parts about it that I didn't like. Like the very beginning of the race, I thought it was really good. The track was really racy. They prepared it in between, like after the truck race and before obviously the cup race started. Yeah, they did some really good things to the track. It was really racy and just really surreal seeing all of those cup cars on dirt for the first time in, I believe, 5 decades, which is really crazy. And before this weekend, I said, I just can't visualize cup cars on the dirt because to me, that's something that seems so foreign and something that I just didn't think it was going to happen. I know in recent years, I've asked drivers, do you think the Cup Series will ever be on dirt? And most of them they were like, not a chance, not ever. We're never going to be on dirt again. And then here we are, racing on dirt at Bristol Motor Speedway.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you would have told me that we were racing on dirt just a year ago or so, I would have laughed and thought you were crazy.
Well,
So
yeah, I saw it was, I think, an Instagram story post from one of my friends who shared something when Daniel Suarez took the lead. And he said, like, imagine telling somebody a year ago, Daniel Suarez is going to be leading a cup race, driving for Pitbull on a dirt track at Bristol. And what people would have thought of that. I think they probably would have looked at you like you were crazy.
yeah, definitely. And despite Daniel Suarez, obviously not getting the win today, it was still an effort that he should be really proud of. Trackhouse has really come far, and it's not often you see brand new teams in the NASCAR Cup Series get up to speed this fast and be competitive, like we've seen with Trackhouse Racing and also 2311 as well. But Trackhouse, I'm just stunned with what Daniel Suarez has been able to do. I think it was I forget which race it was. Might have been Atlanta, whatever. It was a race when I think it might have been Atlanta with the strategy, and Suarez was running extremely well until he got busted for speeding on pit road. And I understand that was really devastating for that whole operation. And that's when I really thought about this team is really coming on. And then to see what they were able to do on dirt, and Suarez literally almost no experience on dirt. He got in a dirt car earlier in the week and ran the truck race for Young's Motorsports, and that was basically it for his dirt experience and for him to go out there, run really well in NASCAR's top level on a dirt track with limited experience. I think today was a huge win for Trackhouse Racing.
Yeah, I totally agree. So we'll get into the whole weekend. Well, I say weekend here. I guess the only real racing that meant anything happened today. I know the trucks got a couple laps in on Saturday, and then that was a total disaster, and we have the whole debacle that we had. But before we get into that, I want to ask you how you got into the sport, because I think I know a little bit of the story already. But just for the sake of the folks watching and listening, you and I are roughly the same age, and I think your first cup race was the 2007 Daytona 500, right?
Yes, you're correct.
Yeah, so mine was the last restrictor plate race before that, the 2006 Fall Talladega race when Brian Vickers got his first win. It's certainly not a very popular victory, but a win nonetheless. But yeah, just tell me how this passion of yours got started, how you got into the sport.
Yeah, I feel like I've told this story a million times and it never gets old. But it was a cold day in February 2007, Sunday afternoon. I was bored. There was nothing to do, freezing cold outside, so I didn't want to go outside and play. I'm go to my room. I'm like, I'm gonna find a cartoon to watch, and I'm gonna enjoy my Sunday afternoon. and I was just flipping through, could not find a cartoon. And then all of a sudden I turn on Fox. And I'm like, wow, look at these cars. And people always laugh when I say this part. I thought they were Hot Wheels because I like real life Hot Wheels. I grew up playing with Hot Wheels, and then I was like, wow, this is really cool. And luckily I caught them in the middle of their pre-race program, and I just sat down, watched, listened. I said, this is interesting. And then when I saw the cars actually racing, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And then what really solidified me as being a NASCAR fan for life was the finish of that race. You had the big one on the final lap. Boyer was upside down on fire in the tri-oval, and then the amazing photo finish between Kevin Harvick and Mark Martin. When I saw the finish of that race, I was like, wow, I got to keep up with this. And I didn't even really know what it was called at the time. I just thought it was real life Hot Wheels, and then learned it was obviously called NASCAR. And then I went online and started doing some research about NASCAR, trying to learn as much as I can. And it's really crazy. I was 7 years old at the time, trying to learn about this because I thought it was the coolest thing. And yeah, and I found out the TV schedule, and I started watching the races weekly. And during this time, we weren't fortunate enough to have cable, and I really hated the summer. I know a lot of people love summertime, but I hated summertime because when NASCAR was on TNT and then ESPN, I didn't get to see a single race on TV because we didn't have cable. So I had to consume the races in the old-fashioned way, listen to it on the radio. Yeah, I know this sounds very old school to a lot of people, but like, yeah, I was just 7 years old, and I was really new to NASCAR and racing in general. But I just fell in love with it instantly, and I wanted to keep up, and and I just went through any means necessary to follow NASCAR, even if it meant pulling out the radio and listening to all the races. And then when when the playoffs were called the Chase, those final 10 races of the season, when it was ABC, I believe,
Yep.
I was really happy. Yeah, it was really crazy. I got to see Daytona all the way up to the Coke 600, or I believe coverage might have ended at Dover back then.
Yeah, I think that's
Am I
well.
correct?
I'm with you. I didn't have cable for much of my childhood, so I was the same way when TNT took over ESPN. That it was a lot harder for me to find footage of the races back then, and I found myself listening to radio quite a bit as well.
Yes, and I had one thing working for me at the time. My cousin lived next door, and she had cable. And every now and then, not every week, she would let me come over to her house and watch the races, which was really cool. And then otherwise, I had this like little radio, a lot smaller than the average cell phone, and I just like lay it beside me on the bed and just listen to the races. And then when the 6 o'clock news would come on or whatever, then I see like the actual visuals and highlights of everything I listened to. Yeah, so I kind of got like an old school feel in the mid 2000s right there. And then once we were able to get cable, was able to keep up and watch all of the races on TV, and I was just a happy camper. And overall, it wasn't my intention to try to have a career in motorsports. It was just something that I really liked. That I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, but when I got a little bit older, and actually at first when I was in high school, I said I want to be a mechanical engineer and work on one of these NASCAR Cup Series teams. And but there's like one problem there. I'm not good at math. I'm not good at science. And I had to have like a come into Jesus moment with myself and say, Kobe, you are not good at this stuff. You need to be honest. I know people say if you work hard, you can make it. But at a certain point, you just have to realize that I just do not have the skills to be successful in this certain career. Yet I told myself I needed to find something new. And then one morning, I'm going on my phone looking at racing news, and then it clicked in my head. And I'm thinking, all of my teachers always said I've been a good writer, and I love motorsports. So I said, why not become a motorsports journalist? And from then on, sophomore year of high school and moving forward, I tried to solidify myself as a motorsports journalist and try to build a career. And it's really crazy how I've been able to progress because I didn't think none of this was possible. One of the biggest things that I've had working for me is social media. I use social media to make a lot of connections with race fans and people working in the motorsports industry. Some of them really appreciated my passion and like some of the work that I did. And over time we just built some really good relationships and go through the networking process. And here I am today, and this is definitely not a victory lap. I know that's what it sounds like. I still have a very long way to go and not a victory lap whatsoever. I'm really proud what I've been able to accomplish, and I'm nowhere near saying I made it in motorsports.
Yeah, I totally was the same way. You know, growing up, I thought of myself as maybe there'd be an opportunity for me to like work on the race cars or something like that. But I got to high school, I realized I was a much better writer. Did much better in my literature and my English classes than in math and science. So that's definitely something that I can relate to. Um, I know what helps get me interested in the racing world was the Pixar movie Cars, which came out, you know, around that time. Had you seen the Cars movie before watching Daytona in '07?
I'm not really sure when I saw Cars, but I did see Cars when I was a little kid, and I was able to immediately make the NASCAR connection. And watching years later, it's so cool how they modeled the first Cars movie after NASCAR. And I just thought the storyline was really great with Lightning McQueen and all the characters, Tow Mater, Sally, Doc Hudson, and all of the lessons that Doc Hudson taught Lightning McQueen and made him a better racer. No, he under Lightning McQueen when he was at like once in a generation rookie. McQueen was very cocky because he was winning all the time. He was the next big thing, at the top of the sport. And then he went missing, and he matured a lot during the time he was in Radiator Springs with the fabulous Hudson Hornet, Doc Hudson, who was a legend back in the day. And I think that was the best thing that really happened to Lightning McQueen, and it just goes to show, like, even with real life NASCAR, that there's a lot of great storylines out there, and I thought the storylines in Cars One was fantastic, just like all the wonderful stories we hear in NASCAR today, whether it's trucks, Xfinity, or Cup. And I'm not even gonna start on Cars Two. I have mixed feelings about that movie, but Cars Three, I really love that one. I thought it was the perfect ending to the series.
Yeah. I will start on Cars too. It's not only the worst of the three, I think it's one of the worst Pixar movies, just period. You know, so I have a lot of problems with that movie, but I think the third one kind of redeemed it as you were saying there. Did you have a favorite driver growing up?
Yes, I did. And when I was covering him during the early parts of my time in trying to be in motorsports journalism, I did a really good job remaining impartial and bias free when covering this driver. And a lot of people would be really surprised, and that I really admired this driver growing up, and that 7-time NASCAR champion Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson was my favorite driver right from the start in 2007, and I really enjoyed following his career. But I knew if I wanted to be in motorsports journalism, when covering him, had to be fair. And and I know some people are biased, but in this business, Ben, you have to be fair and impartial. And I feel like I treated Jimmy fair when covering him. When he did something wrong on track, I pointed it out, and then did not try to make excuses for his mistakes on a track or whatever, and he just tried to do it the right way. Because anyone in motorsports journalism will tell you, we're all fans of the sport, we're all fans, but when it's time to do the job, you have to turn off that fandom, keep that fandom to yourself. Like in the inside, you can be like, goes like this driver, like, come on, you got this. But when you're in the environment, you have to be, you have to be fair. And I know it's hard sometimes, but it's just a part of the process. And one of the things that I really liked about Jimmy Johnson growing up was his character. I always tried to model my own character after him, no matter how much success Jimmy Johnson saw throughout the course of his career. He always remained humble on and off the track, and that's what I've always tried to do in my own life.
Yeah, I think it's a shame that people really didn't come to appreciate Jimmy until the last 2 or 3 years or so, when you know his dominance came to an end. He wasn't winning anymore, and you know it's funny. I feel like you see like maybe the same thing's going to happen to Kyle Busch in the next couple of years. Like these drivers that you know are extremely talented and go out and win a bunch of races. You know, you saw it with Jeff Gordon quite a bit. You know, everybody was rooting for him to go out on top in 2015. You know, you just get tired of seeing the same couple of guys win all the time, and then they kind of get in the twilight of their careers and they're not as dominant as they once were. And it seems like a lot of the boos that you started hearing turn into cheers. And, you know, I think looking back, it really is a shame that we didn't, I don't mean to speak for either one of us, but I'm saying like as a NASCAR community, more people didn't appreciate Jimmy for the dominance that he was able to sustain. I don't think anybody's ever going to win 3 championships in a row again with the format we have now, let alone to go 5 in a row like he and the Hendrick team did from '06 to 2010. So now that Jimmy's retired from Cup racing, I guess you've got to be excited. I think we're all excited, just even as neutral fans of the sport, to see some crossover and drivers trying different disciplines. I think Fernando Alonso's gained a lot of popularity doing that the last few years. He's back in F1 now, but what are you expecting out of Jimmy the next couple of years as he goes to IndyCar?
Well, Ben, I think at the start, I think Jimmy's going to have a lot of growing pains, but you have to give him credit what he's been able to do so far in the car. When Jimmy Johnson first strapped in the IndyCar, he was really far off the pace. And knowing Jimmy Johnson, his work ethic, he kept grinding. He went into those off-season test sessions in the IndyCar. Each session that went by, he got a lot closer to the rest of the field each time, and he even spent time in I think it was an American Formula 3 car, I believe. But yeah, it's a part of the open wheel ladder series. It's not a part of the Road to Indy, but it is an American open wheel racing series. I think it's more like not entry level, but you get what I'm trying to say, like equivalent
Sure.
to FI Formula 3 in Europe. Yeah, Jimmy didn't have to do that to get in that car, but he did to get more experience, and even running all the endurance races in IMSA this year at Daytona, Sebring, Watkins Glen, and Road Atlanta. Although the Cadillac Daytona prototype is not an Indy car, it's like the same driving style, car with a ton of downforce, just like the Indy car on those road and street courses. So I think that's definitely going to benefit him as well. And as far as IndyCar this season, I think a lot of longtime Jimmy Johnson fans who think that Jimmy can, just step in there and be competitive, fight for wins. I don't think that's going to happen this season. Maybe Jimmy will eventually be competitive by the end of next season if he's going to return to IndyCar in 2022. As far as 2021 goes, I think that a good goal for Jimmy Johnson would be to try to shoot for top 15 finishes by the end of the year. I know that doesn't sound like much, but I think if he can at least finish 15th, I think that'll be a great bar for Jimmy Johnson to set, because this IndyCar series is really tough. Jimmy, I believe, is 45 years old now, and he's no longer prime Jimmy Johnson, which you saw win 5 championships in a row. Yeah, he's definitely lost some speed, as we've seen in NASCAR in recent years. And when he was driving a Cadillac DPI, he wasn't exactly the fastest in that either. I just think that people need to be realistic, understand that Jimmy's just not going to jump in IndyCar and be competitive. It's going to take time before we're going to see him mixing it up with all the IndyCar regulars.
Yeah, well, I know he's got a good car, so that's certainly and a good team, good teammates. Obviously, Scott Dixon going for his 7th championship in his series as well. So he's going to have a lot of help in terms of getting him up to speed. And I'm with you. I'm excited to see it. I'm hoping that he stays with it through the end of next year. And I know he said he doesn't want to do ovals, but I'm just kind of like, the way the schedule is right now. If he's thinking about the Indy 500, like kind of on the fence about it, the schedule is predominantly street and road courses anyway. So, you might as well, I feel like, go ahead and, especially now with the aero screen, I know safety's kind of been a talking point, but, we'll see if he gets more comfortable. I'd love to see him full time if he wants to, obviously if he doesn't, I want to respect his decision, but I think it's definitely going to be an interesting story to follow, at the very least.
Yeah, yes, definitely. And I know Jimmy's talked about this in the past and about ovals in the Indianapolis 500. At the end of the day, it's something between Jimmy and his family, because I understand his family might not want him to take the risk of racing the ovals. Although we do have the aero screen now, I think the aero screen is going to be a big help. But still, like if Indy car is like flying in the air and goes airborne into the catch fence, I'm not really sure how good the aero screen is going to do then for the driver, depending on the angle it goes into the fence. So he could still get seriously hurt in the Indy car even with the aero screen. And yeah, so that's definitely something to consider. But like you, I'd really like to see what Jimmy Johnson could do full time in IndyCar if he chooses to do that next year. But my worst fear would be like if let's say, for example, Jimmy has a really tough 2021 season and the transition to IndyCar was, a lot tougher than he imagined, and it would and it's just a big time struggle. I'm wondering if the worst case scenario happened there, would he consider coming back next year, or just like it was too much for me, so I'm just gonna walk away.
Yeah, I don't know. I always thought that, when you and I were growing up, I saw the kind of a truck series as like a place for, nowadays I feel like it's just kind of another ladder on the development level, even though you have your guys like Johnny Sauter and Matt Crafton and a couple of others. Back in the day you had Skinner, Hornaday, Bodine, Terry Cook, tons of Johnny Benson, other great truck series drivers who never really made it at the cup level for too many years, but kind of found a home racing in trucks. And I've always thought it would kind of be interesting, like, if, a few years down the road, if Kyle Busch decides like he just wants to go compete for a truck series championship in his own equipment, or if, somebody like Brad Keselowski wants to do that, I don't know, maybe there'd be something for Jimmy there if he wants to come back to a form of racing that he's used to, but not necessarily go compete in the Cup Series.
Oh, yes, and I know people have had this conversation many times about the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series, how we used to have what we call lifers in the series, and you mentioned a lot of great names there. We still have some today, like Matt Crafton, Johnny Sauter, and it's going to be interesting to see if we're going to have any other Truck Series drivers become lifers. It seems like that might be the route Ben Rose is going. Ben Rose has been in the Truck Series for a while now. I haven't really heard anything about him moving up. Maybe Todd Gilliland becomes a lifer in the Truck Series as well, because it doesn't seem like there's much progress with him moving up to Xfinity or even the Cup Series. And as you mentioned, it's really become just a development championship for all of the upcomers, most notably Toyota, and then they got the Chevrolet development program with GMS and Junior Motorsports that is together. I forget what the name is. I think it might be Driver's Edge development program, something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but there's a lot of young drivers in that series. You don't really see the same type of lifers you had before. I think it would be really interesting if we had a good mix of people, well, drivers who just want to run the Truck Series with not having to feel the pressure to move up, along with those same developmental talents, and instead of what we're seeing now, which is you're seeing more of those driver development farms and less lifers. I think if you find the right balance, then the Truck Series will become even more interesting than it already is.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, I want to get back to your story a little bit before we get into, covering the race weekend and everything. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you're a senior at UNC Charlotte now, is that right?
That's right.
So, I totally would not change a thing about my college experience. But the one regret I have is that when I was looking for colleges, I didn't look at UNC Charlotte really. Because if I had known then what I know now, I know obviously you're in NASCAR's backyard, really. A lot of people in the NASCAR community are there and graduated from there, got their start in the motorsports world. So, obviously you mentioned you've been on this path since your sophomore year, becoming a racing journalist. But just beyond that, what led you to UNC Charlotte and what's your experience been like in college?
Well, what led me to UNC Charlotte was NASCAR. That's really the only reason why I originally wanted to go to UNC Charlotte. I literally knew nothing about the school, like absolutely nothing. And I said I want to go to UNC Charlotte because I looked at the map and saw it was close, Charlotte Motor Speedway, which is literally almost right down the street from campus. Is maybe about a 10-minute drive, not far at all. And then the team shops are close to the campus as well, and it's just really convenient yeah, it's convenient for me, anyone else who's interested in a career in NASCAR. And when I finally got to UNC Charlotte, I learned that there was more to the campus than just being close to NASCAR and everything involved with the sport. I really love the environment. It was a big change for me because I'm from a small rural county, Rockingham County, Reidsville, North Carolina. So there's not really much to do in this small town besides go to high school football games on Friday nights. And then when you get to Charlotte, the Queen City, to me, that city is absolutely enormous. Although it's really not when you compare it to cities like New York, Miami, Los Angeles, Chicago. Las Vegas. Charlotte's really small compared to those cities, but it was a huge adjustment for me because I'd always relied on family to help me out and basically be that crutch. And going to UNC Charlotte really taught me to be independent minded, make my own decisions, and basically just grow up and live without someone holding my hand. So I think the best thing about UNC Charlotte was for me to be able to get that experience that really turned me into the person that I am today. I grew a lot as a student as UNC. I grew a lot as a student at UNC Charlotte, but I do have some regrets because I feel like the one thing I didn't do enough was socializing with people and making more friends that I currently have at that university because I always prioritize racing all the time. I'm like, I have to get back to my room, to my TV, to my laptop so I can cover all of these races so I can keep pushing forward. And when people are like, hey, do you want to like get on the light rail and go to Uptown Charlotte and hang out tonight? I'm like, nope, sorry, I have to cover a race. Then when my roommate be like, hey, we're gonna have a party, would you like to go? I'm like, no, sorry, covering a race. And I feel like I was so dedicated to trying to make it in the sport that I really missed out on some great opportunities to make some memories. But now, you know, we've been in remote learning for a year now. So that college experience basically been over since March of 2020. So I won't have an opportunity to make any of those potential memories anymore. So just really wasted a lot of time there. And that's like my one regret from college that I didn't experience enough.
Yeah, I know. I definitely was very blessed to be able to continue. I've been a runner since sixth grade. I got the chance to run on the cross country and track teams in college, and that was a great place for me to be able to socialize and get to meet new people who had some of the same interests I had. So have you? I guess I should ask about you brought up a good point with COVID and everything and the pandemic. I know we were very fortunate at Gordon up in Massachusetts. Because we're a fairly small college, they were able to get a plan together to have us, obviously with precautions in place and everything, but we got to be on campus for the fall semester. And I had some dual enrollment credits from high school and was able to graduate a semester early. So I don't know exactly what the experience has been like during the current semester, but I know I definitely struggled a lot when we went to remote learning last year. So to be able to be on campus was a tremendous blessing, and I know not everybody was that fortunate. So how has UNC Charlotte kind of handled COVID, and what have they done to continue to try to give you guys the best experience possible?
Actually, I think UNC Charlotte has handled COVID the best way that they possibly could. Although in the heading into the fall semester, I think that they were kind of forced into handling the situation the correct way due to public pressure. I remember everyone was against going back to in-person learning in August because at the time our country was seeing an enormous surge of coronavirus cases, and a lot of students were concerned about their health and how they did not want to be in the dorms. They didn't want to be in the classrooms. They didn't want to be around students who are not going to be following these guidelines because I know there's a lot of students out there who don't really take this pandemic seriously, not just students, just people in general who don't think that this is a big deal at all. And it was a really tense time between students, administration, and but what they decided to do is to prioritize freshmen and what they're calling essential majors. So and people like me who's a senior, we had the option to come back if we want to. Yeah, like basically sophomores, juniors, seniors, or depending on what your major is, you had the option to come back if you want to, but you have the option to opt out as well and stay home and do remote learning there. So the only people who are really on campus, actually since last semester all the way up to now, are freshmen, and because they wanted to prioritize freshmen get into what they call the college experience. I'm sure you've heard that term a lot about the college experience. Yeah, and I thought that was a really good move, especially because freshman year is a I think it's really important that those students are in the classroom and on campus because that's the year where you finally start to break away from high school and become independent. Because imagine once COVID is behind us, if we were completely online and then you have sophomores and freshmen come in. It's basically two big freshman classes who know nothing about college, know nothing about being independent like that, and just don't understand how the college lifestyle works. And that's why UNC Charlotte decided to prioritize them and have them on campus, because they wanted them to get used to that lifestyle. Okay, Ben, there's one more thing that I wanted to bring up, and I'd feel bad if I didn't mention it, but April 30th means a lot to me on a personal level. It means a lot to a lot of people at UNC Charlotte. April 30th, 2019 was one of the scariest days of my life and the scariest days for a lot of other people's lives. And I'm sure you're already aware that was the day when UNC Charlotte had a horrific school shooting, which we lost two of our classmates, Riley and Reed, and it was just awful. It was something that I never expected to experience in my life. To be like, I was on campus during the time of a school shooting, and the place of the school shooting, I literally walked by that place 30 minutes before the gunman opened fire, and it just like hits me deep in my heart, because I was about to go to Chick-fil-A right across from where the shooting happened and sit there and eat, because there was a concert later that night at the football stadium. It was Walk a Flock of Flame, and I'd never been to a concert before in my entire life. And I was going to go with a group of friends, really excited, go to my first concert thinking it was going to be a great day. And it was actually our last day of class of the semester. Then we're going to have reading day to study for exams. And then the final exams, I was really pumped to go to a concert, blow off some stress from the semester, and then sleep it off and get ready for final exams and finish the school year strong. And yeah, and that day was gonna go to Chick-fil-A, sit down, then walk over to the football stadium. But I decided to do something different. I decided that I wanted to change clothes. So I and then go to the dining hall right quick, grab a bite to eat, then go to the football stadium. And I'm really happy that I decided to go back to my room to change clothes, because otherwise I would have seen such a graphic scene. Because in the Chick-fil-A, one of the students that was shot, he was dragged all the way over to the Chick-fil-A so they could tend to him until medical personnel arrived. So if I was like sitting over there, I would have seen something really graphic of someone's bloody shirt after being shot, and I would have heard the shots, which was, I knew if I would have seen that, heard the shots, I would have been in a much worse shape than I was. So at the time, I was on the phone with my mom. I was telling her that I was going to the concert, and she was like saying like be safe, be aware of your surroundings, like moms always do. And then I'm like about to walk out the door, and then we get an alert on our phone, and it says active shooter situation. And I'm like, no way. It said a shot was fired at the Kennedy building. I'm like, this has got to be a joke. And then then you hear all of these sirens. I see a bunch of campus police cars coming up by my dorm, and then I see CMPD. And then after that, the SWAT team is coming, and there's helicopters flying. I'm like, this is unreal. Then I turn on the news on my TV, and then it's on almost every single major news channel. The shooting at UNC Charlotte. That's when it really became real, and I just had no idea what was going on. Then I was looking at my TV. My roommates were on their TV as well, and everyone were just like freaking out, calling people, texting people, because it was really something. You see it on the news, and you don't think it's ever going to happen to you. And in that moment, that's when I really knew, wow, it's happened to me after all. And and that day, I'll never forget how I felt. I felt sick to my stomach. I was like so sick. I couldn't even eat my dinner until 11:30 that night, and it still didn't feel right eating. And then the very next morning, I went in the dining hall, and it was quiet in such an eerie way. Like there was hardly any noise. You heard whispers here and there, but it's not normal where you hear a lot of people talking. And there was a lot of sad looks on people's faces. And then on the stereo system, they always play music in the dining hall. And in one of the songs, there was like a siren sound, and when I heard it, I nearly jumped out of my skin. Yeah, yeah, and it was just because it was all raw and fresh from what happened the previous day, and I was not happy with the dining hall staff for selecting that song with the siren. I'm sure they had no intention of that happening, but for me, that was very triggering after what I experienced the previous day with all of the sirens. blaring for hours, and then to hear that in that song, it just brought back something that was so new to me. And overall, I'm doing much better since the shooting. The weeks after that was really hard to deal with, and watching all of my classmates and peers at UNC Charlotte, we all came together during this period of time, held each other up, went to the kind of like visual a few days after the shooting. I participated in a 2-mile walk run to raise money for the victims' families. It was a really great thing to do. Really glad I was a part of that. And overall, we were just one Niner nation, and we were a family. That was the most closeness I've ever felt in my entire life.
Yeah, I remember that night. Yeah, and just kind of being shocked hearing it on the news. And thinking of you guys because I knew that a lot of people in the racing community were there, and yeah, I can't imagine how difficult that must have been for you guys. So thank you for opening up about that. So I guess looking forward now, you're about to graduate. What we're kind of, I guess everything's kind of fluid now still with the pandemic. I'm hoping that, as more and more people get vaccinated and everything, that cases are going to continue to drop, and hopefully we're closer to the end of this than the beginning. But, what are some of your goals for the next 2 to 3 years? Where would you like to be? Where do you see yourself?
To be honest, I don't really know where I'm going to be within the next 2 to 3 years. Right now, I'm just going with the flow. I'm probably not going to have a job lined up when I graduate from college in mid-May. So right now, I applied for an internship in NASCAR. Hopefully, I'll get that. So fingers crossed, and not a guarantee. Last year, before the pandemic struck, I was gonna be I want to be a social media intern for a team in the NASCAR Cup Series. Not gonna say the team's name, but that was gonna be an incredible opportunity for me. But when the pandemic struck and NASCAR had to save money, they ended up canceling the internship, which was devastating because I thought that was gonna be my one ticket to getting an opportunity to put that on my resume, gain experience, which could potentially lead to a full-time job in NASCAR in some role. And so right now, banking on trying to get something similar in NASCAR with the internship, working with Joe at Grid Network, seeing what we can do with that project, try to build it up into a respectable media outlet. Maybe if it goes well, it'll become our full-time jobs. That's definitely the long-term goal. Hopefully within the next 5 years, not guaranteed, but we're out here pushing. But overall, I'm open to any opportunities out there. But one of my main focuses right now is trying to build Grid Network up to a level where Joe, me, you, everyone who's a part of Grid Network, we're able to make this our full-time jobs if we choose.
Yeah, well, that's actually a nice segue, I guess, because normally we'd be doing Grid Live wrap up right now. I know Joe wasn't available this weekend. But like I said, I didn't get to watch much of the NASCAR stuff today. So I know the outcome, with Logano winning and everything. But I guess we can start with Formula One coming back this weekend. And I've got to say, just from a fan's perspective, this is probably the most hyped and anticipated I've been for a new season in a long time, because I feel like even if you just look past Mercedes and Red Bull, and how close the two teams seem to be, I think after like one of the practice or qualifying sessions or something, like the top 15 cars were separated by less than a second, which, the last couple of years in Formula One, sometimes it feels like Mercedes have been separated by over a second over the next best team. So, what do you think, looking at the battle between Hamilton and Verstappen, do you think there's somebody with a clear edge at this point? Hamilton obviously getting the win in the opening race, which he hasn't done, for a few years. Is that going to give him an advantage, or do you see Verstappen kind of rising up and taking the fight to him and maybe challenging for the world championship this year?
I think it's really too soon to tell, but if the Bahrain Grand Prix was any indication of what we're going to see this season, I think it might be a really close title battle between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. That was such an incredible race. Really, really tight racing at first. I didn't really understand what was going through Red Bull's mind with their early strategy play to leave Max out a few extra laps while Mercedes was successful on the undercut. And in the end, it looked like Max was going to get there. He actually got around him, but as I say, he exceeded track limits. I know that's been a controversy going on social media right now, especially after footage of Lewis Hamilton emerged of him, basically doing the exact same thing for many laps during the race, exceeding track limits, and they did nothing. Then Max Verstappen went around the outside, exceeded track limits to pass, and had to give it back. But I'm not going to talk about that. That's really a debate for an entirely different day. But I think we might be able. I mean, it might be a great season coming up in Formula One, where it'll be Lewis and Max back and forth. I know based on hearsay, a lot of people are going to say that Lewis might have the upper hand here, especially with all of his experience in comparison to Max. But the Red Bull is looking really good. Lucas Sergio Perez did after he stalled on the formation lap. We thought it was all lost for Checo, but another masterful drive by him. He was able to come through the field and pick up some great points for Red Bull, and I think that's a really good sign for the rest of the season for that team. And maybe both drivers can take the fight to them in the constructors if Max is unable to knock off Lewis for the world championship.
Yeah, I think Lewis won the championship the last time. The team that won the constructors, one of their drivers didn't win the title. I think was '08 when Lewis won the drivers' championship for McLaren, and of course Ferrari won the constructors' championship. No disrespect to Heikki Kovalainen, but certainly wasn't quite on the level of Lewis that year, to say the least. But yeah, I mean, what do you think of Sergio Perez this year? I know I'm certainly excited for him to finally be back with a top team after so many years after his stint with McLaren didn't go so well. I kind of thought that if not even making it into Q3 and then stalling on the opening lap, I thought it was all over. The second Red Bull seat seems to be cursed, but he had another brilliant drive up through the field and a nice recovery.
Yeah, obviously, since his failed stint at McLaren, Sergio Perez has grown a lot and matured over the years, especially with his long stint with the now Aston Martin F1 team when they were Force India and Racing Point. It seemed like Sergio really developed into his own with that organization and that superb drive last year at Bahrain just several months ago when he won his very first career Formula One Grand Prix. That was such a wonderful drive by him and he really showed his talent that day, and that was just a chaotic race in general. A lot of stuff that you wouldn't expect to see in Formula One. We saw like George Russell was in a Mercedes. They thought George Russell was going to win until it all went wrong for him, and then Sergio Perez rose to the occasion. I think he was involved in a lap one incident in that race as well, and had to claw his way from the very back to the front, kind of like he did in this race. Although he wasn't able to get on the podium. This is a huge opportunity for Sergio because he's in a top tier car once again, and he's going to be well back then. I'm not really sure if McLaren. What year was he with McLaren
I
again?
think it was 2013. I think he replaced Lewis actually.
Oh yeah, so Sergio being with the top team Red Bull, I think this is a great opportunity for him, or maybe you'll call him an audition for other top tier teams in Formula One as well, because I'm not sure if Sergio is going to be at Red Bull long term, because look, we got this exciting rookie over at AlphaTauri now, Yuki Tsunoda, and I think Yuki is going to be a future star in Formula One, and if Yuki's able to do what a lot of people believe that he's capable of, I think Yuki will be at Red Bull sooner rather than later. And we all know, as you mentioned, the cursed second Red Bull seat. It seems like whichever other drivers in that car, he just doesn't work out at all. And if the same thing happens with Sergio, then he'll probably be out of the seat as well.
Yeah, I didn't really want to get my hopes up too much with the rumors this offseason because it's been a long time since Red Bull went with somebody kind of outside of their junior program. Everybody that they kind of promoted to the main Red Bull team has come from their junior program, come from what's now AlphaTauri, what was back then Toro Rosso. So to see them go for somebody like a Sergio Perez, who's kind of, who has no history with the Red Bull team, is certainly unusual to say the least. But I do think it would have been, especially after he got the win at the end of last season, I think it would have been an absolute travesty if he wasn't on the grid this year. So I'm happy to see him get that seat, and I'm certainly expecting that he's going to be able to do some good things with that this year. Maybe win a couple of races, but it's going to be nice, I think, for Max. He hasn't really had a teammate, since Daniel Ricciardo, who was able to also kind of push him and kind of serve as a reference point, because Pierre Gasly and Alex Albon were both promoted, I think maybe a little bit too early. And when they got to the Red Bull seat, they kind of cracked under the pressure. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how he does this season. Certainly a storyline that I'm looking forward to. And, I think, like you said, Yuki Tsunoda looks absolutely phenomenal. I think when you look at the other two rookies in the field being stuck at Nikita Mazepin, just kind of had a terrible race weekend. Aside from everything that happened off the track this off season, that's a whole controversy that I think everybody knows about, that I don't want to get into too much here. But just looking at strictly on the track, not a very good weekend for him to start off. And Mick Schumacher as well. Obviously he's got a lot of attention with his last name and everything, and people wanting to see him back it up and prove that he's not just there because of his last name, which I think he's done a fantastic job of proving the haters wrong, but going out and winning the F2 championship last year. I think their equipment's really going to limit them this year with how the Haas looks so far. But Yuki Tsunoda to go out and get points on his debut was really, really incredible.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned Haas about their equipment limiting them. I think it's going to be a long, painful season for Haas, and having two rookie drivers on your team, I think that's going to make it even longer. It seems like after Bahrain, Haas is definitely going to be one of the main back markers on the grid. Probably going to be qualifying no greater than 16th. I'll say 16th, 17th on most weekends. Probably won't make it out of Q1 much. I mean, if they develop the car, they might be able to get a car or two into Q2 later in the season. But based on what I saw in Bahrain, I'm not really sure if it's going to be that great of a season for Haas. And with Mick Schumacher, usually, if history serves right, this season is going to be a lot of growing pains for him. But his sophomore year in Formula One, that's when he's really going to turn it on. And that's what I've seen a lot throughout Mick Schumacher's career. The first year is usually a year for him to learn and make those mistakes. And the second year, he comes out and applies everything that he learned in the previous season. As Nikita Mazepin, it was not a good Formula One debut for him at all. Everything that could go wrong for him went wrong. He had multiple spins, a lot of rookie mistakes, and then didn't even get to complete the first lap as he crashed off course. And I believe someone even made a website detailing all of Mazepin's Formula One spins, and it says it's like how many hours since Nikita Mazepin last spun out. And so, yeah, and we already knew that he was going to be the center of a lot of jokes on the internet, especially given people feel like that Haas did not handle the situation of sexual assault properly, because a lot of people believe that Haas should have taken that seriously and Nikita should have been sacked from his seat. But Haas obviously decided to keep him on, and we'll see what happens on the track. And Nikita even said himself he wants to be judged based on his performance on the track.
Yeah, I just don't know what the future. I think when I think of Haas's future, I don't know. I feel like it's no longer America's team. It looks like it's Russia's F1 team presented by America, if anything. And I think you just look at the car and livery itself, and I mean, you don't really need to say anything else. I just feel like, are we maybe going down the path where you're going to kind of see like what happened with what used to be Force India and then Racing Point is now Aston Martin. Lance Stroll getting one of those seats and then his father, Lawrence, buying the team. Is there something lined up for Nikita Mazepin's father, who's obviously a billionaire who brings a bunch of money, just like the case with the Stroll family? Um, you know, it- I think Gene Haas has said multiple times that like if we can't see a path forward for ourselves to actually be competitive, we're not necessarily going to be committed to this for the long haul. Could you see something like that happening where we see a change in ownership at Haas over the next couple of years, and we start going into a period again where we don't have an American team on the grid because it's been sold to the Mazepin family or something like that?
And it's funny you mentioned that because I've been thinking that for ever since actually before I saw the livery, but when I saw the livery, it confirmed my thoughts exactly. It really seems like that Dmitry Mazepin, Nikita's father, is trying to buy into Formula One and have a team for his son so he can ensure that his son stays on the grid. I mean, look what Lawrence Stroll did when he bought Racing Point, and now Aston Martin Formula One. As long as Lawrence Stroll is the owner of that team, Lance Stroll is guaranteed a spot on that grid because his father's the owner. And if Dmitry Mazepin was able to do the same thing, Nikita could be in Formula One as long as he wanted to. Like if he didn't, this is like same for Lance. If it comes to a point, be like, I don't want to be in Formula One anymore. I want a new challenge. I want to go race Formula E, IndyCar, or endurance racing. Then they could just walk away like that. And then they're like, a few years later, I miss Formula One. I want to come back. And I'm like, sure, we can just sack this driver and you can return to Formula One. But I think with Dmitry Mazepin as well, he also tried to buy another team, which failed. And I think it might have been Racing Point, which Lawrence Stroll, I believe. Am I right,
Yeah,
Ben?
I think there were a couple of investors that were looking into it. Obviously, Lawrence Stroll's bid ended up being the winning one. But yeah, I think he's been trying to get into it for a couple of years. So I don't know. I look at Haas and I think to myself, it's been kind of shocking to see Williams fall to the back of the grid, because that's a team with so much history and accolades, as a part of their history. Just you're not used to seeing that name at the back of the grid, and they've kind of been stuck there the last few years, and eventually, Claire Williams is no longer actually involved with the team. It's just a name, and it's new owners over there as well. Um, but there's still like Haas doesn't have any of that. Haas doesn't have the history. They don't have you know anything like that going for them. I guess they had a great debut with Grosjean taking sixth at Australia in 2016, but I really don't know what the future holds for the team, and it's been a while since I've when I think like their 2018 season, like I think if things had gone a little bit differently for them, they probably could have finished fourth in the constructors and been the best of the rest. And I guess the Rich Energy saga maybe was a turning point, but it's I went from being so excited to see an American team on the grid to it's just kind of like whatever, because they're running at the back of the field all the time, and constantly involved with some sort of controversy, and you just come to not really expect much of them.
Yeah, yeah. When I first heard of Haas F1 forming that organization, I got really excited to see an American team on the grid. And for me personally, because Haas F1 is from my state, North Carolina, located in Kannapolis. I thought it was so cool that we had a Formula One team that was based in the United States and maybe about 45 minutes to an hour away from UNC Charlotte campus. So it was like really cool to be that close to an actual Formula One facility. But what I'm seeing now, with the car in Russian colors and all of that, Nikita Mazepin's there, and the uncertainty around Haas's future, I'm really looking for Gene Haas, to exit the sport and just focus on his NASCAR program with Tony Stewart Haas Racing. At this point, this is just my personal opinion. I don't really see how Gene Haas is going to stay in Formula One long term at this point, especially with the Russian sponsorship, and then the car is basically like the Russian flag. It really seems like that this is setting up for an eventual takeover by Dmitry Mazepin.
Yeah, I don't even know how much. I feel like every time you hear about Haas, it's Gunther Steiner or it's the Mazepins or somebody. we haven't heard too much from Gene recently, about his F1 team. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to follow that story and see what happens with them going forward. Um, so kind of looking at everybody else, who do you think? Obviously we expect Mercedes and Red Bull to be fighting for the title, and it looks like Ferrari aren't quite as dreadful as they were last year, but I don't know that they're back at a level yet where they can compete, for a championship, much or race wins, even much less a championship. So when you look at everybody else, you got McLaren there, you got a new Aston Martin team, Renault now being Alpine, and AlphaTauri obviously even won a race last year. They look like they can. They don't want to be the junior team; they want to be the sister team to Red Bull. Who do you think is going to be, after Mercedes and Red Bull, the third best team on the grid this year? When you look at the driver lineups and the resources that each of the teams have, who do you think has the best chance of being in that position?
McLaren hands down. After watching what they were able to do in practice, Lando Norris was really fast right from the start. Ended up finishing fourth, I believe, in the Bahrain Grand Prix. And Daniel Ricciardo wasn't too far behind him in terms of speed. I really think that McLaren team has taken huge steps forward over the years. I remember ever since the Honda fiasco and the fallout there, McLaren basically had to rebuild this Formula One program from the ground up, and I think they're definitely moving forward and switching to Mercedes power this year. I know there was a lot of questions. Switching power units, is that going to hurt all of the gains that they made last year? And it's based on this one race I saw, probably not, because Lando Norris was basically the best of the rest in Bahrain, and it's going to be interesting following this next stretch of Formula One Grand Prix races to see if McLaren can be the next best after Mercedes and Red Bull duos.
Yeah, I know McLaren got close a couple of times last year, Monza in particular. But it's kind of hard to believe we're coming up on almost a decade since McLaren won a Formula One race. Kind of crazy to think about, but I think they definitely have a shot at breaking through this year and getting one. So I'm with you. It'll probably be my pick to finish third again. And I guess the last thing that I'm really interested in is obviously we always thought of Fernando Alonso as one of the best drivers on the grid when he was still in Formula One. He's been away for a couple of years. What are you expecting out of him this season as he returns?
Well, I expect Fernando he's going to have some good days where he's going to get good points for the Alpine team, and then there's going to be bad days like he had in the season opening Bahrain Grand Prix when he had to retire from the race. And Fernando's career is really interesting to me because it seems like in this last half of his Formula One career, he'll be at a program that is struggling, and then as soon as he leaves, that program gets better all of a sudden. So I'm wondering, is Fernando a bad luck charm for the team that he's with? Because I know Fernando has to be kicking himself watching what McLaren is doing right now. Because if he had stuck with McLaren just a little while longer, Fernando would be finishing fourth in this Grand Prix in Lando Norris's car. And also after he left Ferrari, he could have been winning races in that car, and now switching to Alpine, coming back to Formula One. I'm really curious to see if that team can become more competitive, and I'm particularly gonna be looking at next year where people expect with the new rule change of the new car that it's gonna be wide open, and we might see some teams able to get out there and fight Mercedes. We don't know if Mercedes is still going to be the top team or not. Like, can Alpine take advantage of the rules next year and potentially put Fernando in a position to fight for a Formula One World Championship and podiums, finish higher up in the points? But I've always thought about the trajectory of Fernando's career. I just don't understand. Every time he leaves a program, it immediately approves. Like, have you thought of that as well?
Yeah, it's funny to me, because I don't know if that's, like you're saying, I don't know if it's down to bad luck or if Fernando, it's something about him being of a team being a bad influence, and then when he leaves, he's no longer there, and the team was able to recover a little bit. It's kind of funny to me how, I mean, even his first stint in McLaren in 2007, that was a tumultuous year when Lewis's rookie year and everything and all the controversies they had. Um, but I just, looking back, I think if he had stayed at Ferrari, you know, by the time 2017, 2018 came around, I think he could have won the title at least one of those years. Because I think that the Ferrari that season, Sebastian Vettel had he started out leading the points for quite a few races, and then you got to the midpoint of the season, and something happened. Like in 2017, I think it was Singapore, 2018, Germany, and that was really the turning point. And then, of course, Lewis went on to kind of control the season from there. If you put Fernando in the Ferrari one of those 2 years, I think he could have won the title. And now looking at McLaren, it's kind of the same way. They had some of their worst years ever when he came back to the team, and now we're talking about them as a top 3 team in Formula One again. So I don't know. I feel like I don't think we're going to see him. I think it's probably going to be a stretch for him to win a race this year, especially because he's been away from so long. But also, I don't know that the Alpine is quite at that level yet. But we know he's locked in for this year or next year at least. So we'll see if when the new regulations come out, if somebody can kind of find a loophole and leapfrog up to the front. I think it'd be great for the sport if he's up there fighting again. But we'll have to see. He's been away for a little while, and I know he's a great driver, but I don't know what to expect yet from him. I think it's still pretty early.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I've been thinking about recently is Hamilton's 1 year contract deal, and it just seems kind of odd that Lewis has signed a 1 year deal, considering all of the success that he and Mercedes have had. Even Lewis said himself after he won the Bahrain Grand Prix, Lewis said that he loves what he does. He basically loves his job being a Formula One driver for Mercedes. So I'm thinking if you really love it like that, like why do you sign a 1 year deal? Are you seeing something with the regulations next year where Mercedes might not be the top team, where another team might be poised to succeed in 2022 and beyond? But the bigger question that I have for you, Ben, I'm wondering 2021, Lewis Hamilton could be going for a record 8 Formula One World Championship, and that would put him on the top of the mountain all alone. And I've spoke with Joe from Grid Network about this, and I'm just wondering, do you think we could be witnessing the final season of Lewis Hamilton's racing career?
I feel like it is starting to feel like that in some ways. Like I think of the Last Dance, documentary this past year with the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan. Like it kind of feels like it's the last dance for Lewis. Why is he only signing a 1 year deal? It might be a good time to get out of the sport and go try something else if he doesn't like what he sees with the new regulations, or if he wants to just go try something else, just the same way that Fernando Alonso's wanted to try something else. And there's a couple other things too. I feel like I remember it might have been a 60 Minutes interview or something like that after he won his 3rd world championship. I think he said he wanted to do it until he was 37.
Now I'm on a quest to try and figure out what I want to do, particularly when I stop, because 9 years have gone really quick in Formula One. I've probably got another 7, maybe 7, 8.
You think you'll be racing for 7, 8 years?
I think so. I think 7. I think I'm going to stop when I'm 37.
And he's going to turn 37 this off season, I think. So we're coming up toward that time. And you see Kimi Räikkönen's in his early 40s and he's still going. So he could easily stay at least another 2 to 3 years, I think, if he wanted to. But I think Lewis has talked about he visited Jeff Gordon in his final race at Homestead. He's tested a NASCAR car in the seat swap with Tony Stewart. I think he said he wanted to do a NASCAR race one day. So if you get out of a sport, if you get out of Formula One rather, when you're young enough, I think we've seen Felipe Massa do it in Formula E. There's definitely an opportunity for you to kind of go on and have a second career. And the other thing is, I think it would just kind of be, poetic, if he goes out winning an 8th championship and breaking Michael's record. And, you got to think that he's going to cross over 100 wins this season. He's got nothing more to prove in Formula One. He's already shattered, almost every record imaginable. I just think if there is a time for him to want to move on to something else, it seems like the end of this year would be a good opportunity for him to go on and make that the turning point.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. If Lewis is able to have a season like he's had the past several seasons, be completely dominant, win a bunch of races, lock up the championship a few races early, win that 8th championship, standing on top of the mountain, as I just mentioned. Nothing else to prove in Formula One. He could just simply walk away because there's nothing else for him to accomplish. He basically have accomplished everything that any driver ever dreams of accomplishing in Formula One. And I really don't think that Lewis would be interested in being teammates with someone like George Russell, because I think in that case, if we have a team of Lewis, Hamilton, and George Russell at Mercedes, I think that they would butt heads and it would create a major conflict within the team. Kind of like, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did Lewis Hamilton? He was teammates with Fernando Alonso at one point, right?
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's what I was thinking. I think it would be something like that, because in my opinion, George Russell is a number one driver, and just like Lewis Hamilton, number one drivers put two number ones on their team. I don't think it would end well at all. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
really believe that Lewis would be interested in that, and I don't really see. And the reason why I bring George Russell up is I don't really see Mercedes holding on to Valtteri Bottas next year in 2022.
Yeah, I think George Russell definitely proved last year, he could have won that race, where he was filling in for Lewis, no question. So I think there's going to be some calls for him to. I think there were even this offseason, calls for him to go into the second Mercedes seat and replace Valtteri Bottas. But I think Bottas is kind of the best possible scenario teammate for Lewis Hamilton, because you think back to when Nico Rosberg was in that other Mercedes car. I think Rosberg's kind of another driver who I don't think we appreciated how good he was, when he was still racing, because you see how everybody says Lewis always wins because he has the best car. But if you look at what Valtteri Bottas, and, Bottas has won, a handful of races here and there, and he's definitely a good driver, but, he's not been able any of the last 4 years to really truly challenge Hamilton for a championship. So, I think, Lewis's career is just so amazing. Like when you think about it, he could easily have 10 championships by now. He lost by just 1 point in 2007. 2010 was wide open. He was very competitive. McLaren were pretty good that year. I think if things had gone a little bit differently, he could have probably won that title. And then 2016, I think if his engine doesn't, fail at Malaysia, I think he's got a very good chance of going into Abu Dhabi and winning that championship as well. So, it's just amazing to me how, he's the only driver to win at least one race every year he's been in the sport. Like I said, he's got nothing more to prove in Formula One. He's already done virtually everything there is to do, except break the record for most world titles, which he could very well do this year. So I'm hopeful that the championship goes down to the last race. I think it'd be a great story if Max goes on and wins his first and puts Red Bull back on top, or if Lewis, wins his 8th and obviously breaks Michael Schumacher's record, and then maybe he goes out on top. I think either one is going to be a great story. I just hope that we don't know the outcome until, it comes time for the check flag at Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, we definitely it will be more exciting for everyone watching it if the championship goes on. So I really hate it when the dominance is so great where the driver will lock it up a few rounds early. I mean we might catch some really good racing after the championship is locked up, but I like the suspense of it going down to the final round. And this is a story for another day, but I'd really like to see a venue change for the season finale, because as everyone knows, the Yas Marina circuit doesn't exactly produce the best on track product. But going back to Lewis Hamilton for a second, it's gonna be interesting to see what he does in the next chapter of his life, whether it's gonna be like Fernando Alonso trying out the marquee races in motorsports, I'm thinking, could we see Lewis Hamilton compete in the Daytona 500 in a second car for 2311 Racing as Bubba Wallace's teammate in the future? That's something that's crossed my mind because I know in the past Lewis said he would be interested in potentially trying out the Daytona 500 or just NASCAR someday. It would be really cool if Lewis and Bubba were teammates in the Daytona 500. I don't know how Lewis particularly feels about oval racing. Could we see him try to go for the Triple Crown, try to win the Indianapolis 500, try to win the 24 Hours of Le Mans? And if Lewis does that, that would be absolutely incredible. And on another thing, are we going to see Lewis in his music career take off? Because I know he did a song with Christina Aguilera, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite good too. I mean, it's just I can't get over the fact that it's actually, he goes under a stage name. I think it's XNDA. But yeah, I mean he's set for sure. Whenever he retires from motorsports, he's got his music. He's got, he's going to be perfectly fine. No matter what he chooses to do. So yeah, I guess we can kind of jump gears now, like I've said, I didn't get a chance to watch races today because it got postponed, but I've got very mixed feelings about this weekend because I feel like just from the start, it's a failure on a lot of levels for NASCAR to not be as well prepared as they probably could have been. I don't know how I feel about the facts that instead of going to, it's one thing to want a dirt track and a dirt race in the Cup Series, but you just poured a bunch of dirt on Bristol and said hey, you got your dirt race here, why didn't we just go to a real dirt track if we wanted a dirt race that badly? So what do you just what are your general thoughts of seeing the Cup Series on dirt? And should we go back? I mean, we're going to go back now. We just announced today, but what do you think? Is this something that we're going to see be successful for years to come, or is it just going to turn into another race on the calendar and not be all that special?
Well, when we're talking about dirt racing and the Cup Series, I was just starstruck and amazed at the fact that the Cup cars were on dirt in general. As I mentioned earlier, I thought it was, I think it's just the sight of seeing those cars on the dirt for the first time in over 50 years. It was a remarkable sight. And first part of the race, thought the racing was pretty good until we started seeing cautions after cautions after cautions. And it was just some really crazy incidents out there. Eric Almirola took 2 hard hits and he was out of the race and not happy. Yeah, and I thought the Bristol crew did a good job preparing the track during the first part of the race, but once the track got a little worn out, then the dust came. It really looked like a dust bowl, a dust storm, sandstorm, whatever you want to call it. And I think that overall, with this event that we saw with the Bristol dirt race, there's some good to take out of it, and then there's some not good to take out of it as well. And some of the good to take out of it, give NASCAR a lot of credit for trying something new. It was bold when they announced that they were going to run a Cup Series race on dirt. After for the longest time, people said that these modern day Cup cars were not capable of running on the dirt. And then a lot of criticism about the Goodyear tire that they made for the Truck Series at Eldora, said that they didn't exactly get that tire right. So how are they going to build a good tire for the Cup Series? And as we've seen this race weekend, the tire didn't exactly hold up the best. That's why we had to have competition cautions, and we couldn't really run no more than, I believe, 50 laps at a time because they were afraid of these tires blowing out, and NASCAR ended up adjusting the stage length. So that's definitely something that Goodyear is going to have to learn next time around when we return to Bristol dirt in spring 2022. And I'm more curious to see how in the world are they going to run the next gen car on a dirt race, because that car has a diffuser on the bottom of it, and and then the change in tires as well, and the size, how is Goodyear going to develop a dirt tire for the next gen cars? And we saw how challenging it was for them to develop a tire for this event and then switch into a brand new car next year, a car that's really unknown. and there's going to be a lot to learn about the next gen car. Yeah, I'm just curious to see how Goodyear is going to go about that. And one of the biggest things that I think NASCAR can take away from this is track prep. They're going to have to do a lot of homework over the next few months to make sure that we don't have the track as dusty as it was, because some of the incidents we saw on track, a lot of it had to do to, really low visibility. And those drivers need to see. It was really crazy to listen to the radio. The drivers saying, like, I can't see. Visibility is close to zero. And then saw fans who were at the track posting photos, and you could barely see the cars on the track because it was so dusty. And people even suggested getting their dirt from somewhere else next time, like the Midwest, because it'll be harder for the dust to appear with that certain dirt instead of taking dirt from Tennessee. And overall, like I said, credit to them for taking the chance here, do something new. And there's definitely a lot of lessons to learn from this. But like you said, Ben, I think if they truly want to race at a dirt track, they should go to an actual dirt track like Eldora Speedway, Knoxville, even the Charlotte dirt track across the street from the Speedway. Yeah, go to a real dirt track, and they wouldn't really have all of the problems that they face at Bristol. But since we are coming back to Bristol dirt next year, I really hope that they look at all of the things that went wrong, put them into place next year, and make sure that they're able to put on a good show. When hopefully they can try to pack the grandstands. By that point, maybe we'll be out of this pandemic.
Yeah, I guess, like I don't envy NASCAR's position here at all. Because I'm sure the logistics, there'd be a lot of hurdles to jump over that I don't even know exist. Because I'm just looking at it from a fan's perspective. But like you mentioned, you have trucks have been going Eldora for years now. You have a truck race coming up in Knoxville this year. You've got a dirt track at Charlotte. You've got a dirt track at Las Vegas that the K&N cars raced for a couple of years. What's now the ARCA West Series. I feel like if you're so set on bringing the Cup Series back to dirt, or bringing dirt back to the Cup Series, I guess, why are we spending so much time and effort literally recreating an existing racetrack in Bristol Motor Speedway, and then you're going to have to completely undo all of that to run the night races there, in a few months. And then we're going to repeat the process next year and bring all the dirt back. And like, it seems to me like it's a waste of resources when instead you could just go to an actual dirt track.
Yeah, and I was actually really surprised when they announced on Fox today that it would be returning to to dirt next year in the spring, because I thought it was a huge logistical challenge for them to be able to pull off something like this. And I was thinking that maybe we won't see it back next year, but a year after that, like every other year, because it's so much effort to lay down the dirt to protect the concrete from getting damaged by the dirt, and just everything that goes into creating this Bristol dirt track. So to see that they're going to bring it back another year, it seems like there's going to be a lot going on, especially if it becomes an annual thing where we're going to be racing at Bristol dirt permanently now in the springtime, along with the night race on the concrete. It's going to be very, very hectic trying to get that track set up ahead of time, where every year you're going to have to get all this dirt, pack it down, make sure everything's right, run the race weekends and all of that, then take it up, make sure the surface is ready for the Bristol night race, and then just repeat the process over and over again. I thought that would be a logistical nightmare, but apparently NASCAR is willing to go big and bold, and they're willing to roll up their sleeves and work hard to try to make this event a success. And I do want to see this succeed. I think, I thought this year's race had some good moments and some not so good moments, but my main thing is take what you learned from today's race, especially everything that went wrong. Go around, talk to people who know what they're talking about when it comes to dirt racing, get advice, listen to the drivers, and I think next year could potentially be a lot better than what we saw today.
Yeah, I think part of the argument is capacity and like your resources being able to host a cup race. But I kind of feel like the days of 160,000 people showing up for the Bristol Spring Race, like it's going to be a long time before NASCAR is back at that level, if it ever even gets back to that level. So I don't think you necessarily need to plan for filling up that many seats in the audience and in the grandstands. I think if we want to have a dirt race on the schedule, I like I've been saying, I think go to an actual dirt track. I just don't see how, there are so many tracks in this country that NASCAR doesn't go to. I know we're going to a lot of new tracks this season, but I guess the obvious one is North Wilkesboro. Seeing the state that it's in, and let me be clear, like I'm well aware that the chances of North Wilkesboro hosting professional racing again are virtually zero. But when you're putting all these resources into literally changing the surface of Bristol twice a year now, which it seems like they're going to be doing, Phoenix getting reconfigured back in 2011, and now getting a huge makeover again just a couple of years ago. When that's happening to those tracks, but North Wilkesboro is just sitting there and rotting away. Nazareth is obviously even more far gone. There has to be a middle ground, I think, because if those tracks can get 8 and 9 figure makeovers, why is so much history just sitting there and just letting nature take it back? It just doesn't sit well with me. Even if we're not going to see racing come back there, like the facility shouldn't just be lost to history. So if we can we can't seem to do anything over there, but we're gonna spend all sorts of time and money and resources into creating a fake dirt track at Bristol, for the next however many years we're going to be doing this. I've got mixed feelings about it, but I guess I should ask you, personally, like I said, I've seen a lot of mixed feelings on my timeline. Did you think we put on a good show today?
I thought there were points where the show was good, and I also thought there was points when the show wasn't good. And at the point where we saw that things were starting to fall apart, when we get the call that we hardly ever see from NASCAR, when they said we're gonna do single file restarts for the rest of the race. I'm like, single file restart? I said, wow, this is a real throwback. I don't remember the last time we had single file restarts in NASCAR. It's been a really long time since we reverted. Since we started doing the double file restarts instead of the single file restart. It really felt like old school NASCAR there, because the surface was so dusty, and with the drivers 2 by 2 by 2, it just made the dust worse. So in terms of just for being cautious and for safety, NASCAR decided to do the single file restarts, and at that point, that's in my mind, I thought that's when they were starting to lose the show. But like I said, I thought there was some good racing at certain points throughout the race, and then there were points of the race where you're like, oh my goodness, this is not going well at all.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it was I remember when they changed. It was Pocono in 2009, and the wave around rule was brand new, and I remember Kyle Petty in the TNT booth saying, this is as big as the 3-point shot coming to basketball.
Here's what I think. This is a huge change in our sport. This is like the 3-point shot in basketball. This is going to change the sport moving forward.
Like it's a complete game changer. And, I guess if you want to stick with that analogy here, like imagine if, you're in the middle of an NBA game, like a regular season NBA game, it counts towards your win-loss record and everything. And the referees decide, okay, we're taking the 3-point line away for the rest of the game. Like, if you change the rules you play by that much, like it's just, it's such a radical thing. Like it's unimaginable. It seems absurd, and it's not a direct comparison here in NASCAR, but it seems like there's a group chat that I'm in. Somebody said today, like, they were quoting whose line is it anyway? They said, welcome to NASCAR where everything's made up and the points don't matter.
Hello, and welcome to NASCAR, where everything is made up and the points don't matter.
It's just kind of like you're going to change the rules mid-race. Like, is there any sort of precedent for that? Like, what kind of precedent does that set going forward? So I didn't like that too much. And like I said, I'm going into it blind, not having watched much of a race, only seeing the highlights so far. But that seems kind of strange to me. That race control could pull that card and just say, like, if they can say, well, we're going to go to single file restarts now, like what can't they do if they so desire, going forward?
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up because we all know how handy Bob Pockers from Fox Sports is. Bob actually posted the section of the rule book on Twitter showing that NASCAR has the discretion to change any of the rules at any time that they want. So technically they were able to do that. I wasn't mad about NASCAR's decision to switch to single file restarts. It's something that we've been used to far, in the past. But right before the switch to double file restarts, they do single file restarts in dirt racing all the time. So I wasn't particularly upset about that. I just thought it was really odd for them to make that move during the race.
Yeah, I don't know what's more surprising to me, the fact that NASCAR has that in the rule book, or the fact that Bob Pockras was able to find that page in the rule book and put it on Twitter that quickly. That's just, he's definitely one of the best journalists we have in the sport. So I guess, we've talked a lot about this race. Joey Logano getting the win, 7 winners in 7 different races. I think Mike Joy said it's the first time since 2014 that's happened. So, we keep talking. And I've been saying on Grid, I just don't see more than 16 race winners happening. But, it's like, well, with every passing weekend, now we're seeing a different winner. You've got to get 7 and 7 before you can get, 17 in 26 or whatever it's going to be. So, do you feel like we have, obviously in F1, we pretty much know it's going to be Hamilton or Verstappen most weekends. Is there any clear indication in NASCAR right now, who we think might be a championship favorite?
No, not at all. I don't think there is one driver right now who's the favorite. And I said on Twitter after the race, the parity right now in the NASCAR Cup Series is unreal. And I know Fox has been hyping the best season ever, but I don't know if it will be the best season ever. But it's certainly been an interesting season. I'll tell you one thing: I did not predict 7 winners in 7 different races. That's really crazy. And I still don't think we'll get to 16 different winners. I'm thinking maybe we'll get to as high as 14 different winners, and then we'll start to see some of the repeat winners who have already won races. It's just really crazy. It's just really crazy that we're this far in with so many different winners. And I think might be the last time we were like this, like a season started off like this with a bunch of parity. It might have been that 2011 season, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Well, yeah, obviously, Trevor Bayne shocking the world winning the Daytona 500 that year. I don't think anybody predicted that. And then I think Jeff Gordon broke his winless streak at Phoenix. Carl Edwards, I think, won very early in the year and then didn't win again. Obviously, he was in the title fight, but I think. I'm trying to think back to that season, but I think you're right. It was kind of like, up in the air who was going to be the title contenders. And then we got to the chase, and obviously it was all Stewart and Edwards all the time, and clearly going to be a battle between the two of them. But yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I guess you really can't make a championship prediction these days like you can in other forms of motorsports, just because of the system we have. I've talked about my feelings on the playoffs at length. I don't feel like I need to repeat those at this point, but it is a reality. And, I think if nothing else, like you were saying, Lewis wrapping the title up, with 3 races to go the last couple of years, it does force it to go down to the final race. And I guess that's something that some fans enjoy. Others are divided on the issue, but we'll see. I'm with you. I think it's far too early to see to make an argument for who is, on top right now, let alone who's going to be on top in November.
Yeah, definitely. Really excited to see what's going to happen in the upcoming months. I know we got some really great racetracks coming up. I think Martinsville is the next one in 2 weeks, and we also have a super speedway, Talladega. I know I'm definitely not going in order here. At Talladega, you got the new road course at Coda, and then the Coca-Cola 600, and that's really about the time where, towards the end of May, where we finally see who the real players are and where the season's going, and who's the potentially early favorite for the championship could be. I know last year Kevin Harvick was absolutely incredible during the regular season, and it seemed like it was definitely going to be a Kevin Harvick type of year. And then towards the end of the season, he just fell apart completely in that final round of the playoffs. And I've said this on Grid, I don't really think that Kevin Harvick has recovered from that late season playoff collapse.
Yeah, I think Stewart-Haas as a whole, doesn't look like. It's funny, we talk about Haas F1, not looking like, they're off to a very good start, and not seeing a very bright future for them right now. I think Stewart-Haas, you're at the point of a season where you've got to be, if you're not maybe hitting the panic button yet, you got to be a little bit concerned. Looking at the performance of that team, it doesn't seem like it's where it's been in recent years.
Yeah, definitely. Stewart-Haas as a whole, not the same as we've seen in recent years. The entire program, it seems like they're steps down from Joe Gibbs Racing, Team Penske, Hendrick Motorsports. I think those are the top three teams right now in the Cup Series, and then you have Stewart-Haas down right below them. And this is really crazy to see how far that program has fallen. I mean they haven't obviously fallen far, but you can't go into every race weekend now and thinking we're going to see a Stewart-Haas car in victory lane. And I understand they got two young drivers over there, Cole Custer, Chase Briscoe. I think Cole Custer is finally starting to come into his own a little bit. Chase Briscoe, rookie in the Cup Series, no practice, no qualifying most weekends. I think he's gonna have some growing pains this year, but I do think eventually Chase Briscoe will develop into a solid Cup driver, and I'm be interested to see if Kevin Harvick is gonna be able to overcome this hump of the late season playoff collapse. And Eric Almirola, this has been a disaster start to his season in general.
Yeah, real quick before we we're coming up on an hour and a half here, I want to let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening here, but Martin Truex Jr. in the truck race, did you see that coming at all?
Not at all. I was really surprised to see how well Martin Truex Jr. running that number 51 track. I guess I shouldn't be surprised since it is Kyle Busch Motorsports equipment, but due to Martin Truex Jr.'s limited experience in dirt, I'm not really sure how much dirt experience he has, if any, but I do know it's very limited. And for him to go out there and school the field, I'm like, wow, that was just something I did not see coming. I thought Martin Truex Jr. I didn't think he'd be terrible. I thought he would be respectable, but not dominant like he was in the truck race. And I know how strongly you feel about Cup drivers running in trucks in Xfinity. So I'm sure you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it is cool to see, Martin's. I think he's the 36th driver to win in all three series. So that's a cool stat. And like I said, I don't hate the drivers for doing it because it's within the rules and regulations. But like imagine if Lewis just on a random race weekend was like, yeah, I'm going to go run the F3 race too. I mean, it's just kind of, I don't know how you explain that to somebody who's not like. I remember watching was at my grandmother's house watching the Las Vegas race in 2007 for the Busch Series. What was then the Busch Series, now the Xfinity Series. And, I was confused because I was like, Jeff Burton's in this 29 car. I thought he was in a 31. Tony Stewart's in a 33. I thought he was number 20. It's like, I don't think there's another, maybe there is, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but is there like another league or sport that allows their drivers to do that? Because you never see, Scott Dixon doesn't run Indy Lights races. You know, you never see an NBA player go play a couple of G League games. You know, unless they're like a two-way player, and I think it's a little bit different because, you know, I think at that age you're still developing, and you know you're a young NBA player. But like you never see LeBron suit up for the Lakers G League team. Like we never see here in Philadelphia, we never see Joel Embiid go play a Delaware Blue Coats game. You know, so it's like I've said, you know, it's another subject that I've talked about at length, and you know, people should know where I stand at this point. But you know, I've got mixed feelings because as strongly as I feel, I do see the argument that like, you know, people are going to be talking about Martin Truex Jr. because he is a Cup driver, he has the notability, and you know, for Kyle Busch Motorsports, they can probably sell more sponsorship that way. But at the same time, you know, I feel like the other side of it is there could have been a Truck Series regular, a development driver, maybe even at this particular race, a Dirt Series ringer, you know, coming in and getting an opportunity to run a truck. And because Truex is in that truck now, you know, that's, and a lot of Cup drivers doing it for this race weekend in particular, you know, that's one less opportunity for somebody like that to enter the race, you know, so that's just my feelings on that. You know, I feel like I would like to see, I don't know. I don't think we're ever going to see it eliminated entirely, but you know, it does kind of leave a unpleasant taste in my mouth when I see like, you know, Cup driver goes out there, no matter who it is. Like I said this when I've been a diehard AJ Allmendinger fan my whole life. When he ran the Watkins Glen race a couple of years ago in Xfinity for GMS, you know, I was still consistent. I'm saying the same thing. Like when you see a Cup driver take away the stage points, take away the stage wins, and therefore the playoff points, take away the race win, you know, it's like, what's in it for the truck guys?
Yeah, definitely. And one of the points you just brought up is something I'm gonna be watching for later in the season. You said those Cup guys who just wanted to get experience for the Cup race later on, taking the spot of a potentially a dirt track ace trying to run the Truck Series and see what they can do in NASCAR, kind of like Kyle Larson, who was in the number 44 Nice truck. I know one World of Outlaw star who was looking for a seat for this race, David Gravel. That could have been a seat for David Gravel to be in that number 44 car, but Kyle Larson took the seat, or anyone else. I know Logan Seavey, who's a dirt track racer as well. He's driven the number 51 for Kyle Busch Motorsports in the past at Eldora on the dirt. Yeah, that's something that. Well, I'm just using Logan as an example here. Logan could have been a dirt track ringer in that 51 seat. And it might be disappointing for a lot of people that because of all of these Cup drivers in the race, we could have potentially seen a high profile name from the dirt tracks racing NASCAR. And on that level, that's really unfortunate. And that some of the newer tracks on the Cup schedule, like COTA, Road America, Nashville, those tracks, when NASCAR, so I think later in the season when NASCAR goes to those tracks, are we going to see the same thing where we're going to see Cup drivers entering those Xfinity races? I already know it's been announced that Kevin Harvick is going to be running a second Stewart-Haas racing Xfinity car on the road courses at COTA and Road America to get experience in those races. And also Kyle Busch is putting Road America on his schedule this year as well, because that's the track he hasn't raced at yet. I believe he might have raced at Road America before, but I'm not particularly sure, because I remember that when Road America was first introduced to the Xfinity calendar, that was the years when Kyle Busch ran a whole bunch of Xfinity races. So I definitely have to double check on that.
Yeah, I know. I think 2010 was the first year Road America was on the schedule, if I recall correctly. And I think when Kyle won the championship in 2009, obviously. I don't think he's run a full season since then. So, you know, with Road America being a standalone event historically, I think Gibbs has kind of used road course drivers or development drivers. So I don't recall, I don't know for sure, but you know, that would make sense to me. You know, he certainly hasn't run it very much. You know, so that would certainly be one where I think, you know, you only get 5 now. So I think that would be a good track to choose for him if he wants to continue doing the maximum he's allowed.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure other drivers as well might try to find seats for those races, since we will have practice and qualifying They're for the Cup Series. You have any track time that can be really helpful for their Cup program. But at those road courses, if we see the same thing we saw at Bristol with them pulling double duty in the truck race, we might miss out on seeing some of the road course ringers come in and try to get those seats. Like might miss out on seeing an Andy Lally or whatever. Might see a different Cup driver. Let's say for example Tyler Reddick, who's driven that second seat for our Motorsports. And Andy Lally was supposed to drive for our Motorsports, and then the situation with the owner point situation, it rained at Daytona, so they couldn't get the O3 in. So Andy had to run for BJ McLeod. So for example, in Andy Lally, if he was going to run, let's say Road American at number 23 by our Motorsports, but a driver like Tyler Reddick, who's already driven for that team, wants to get more experience at Road America to help him on Sunday, then that could prevent a road course ringer like Andy Lally from competing in the event.
Yeah, practice. I mean, qualifying even more so than practice, but I think both of those need to come back sooner rather than later. And I'd like to see. I put a tweet out about this as well. When qualifying comes back, because I hope it will. I'm going to try to speak it into existence here. Not if, when it comes back. It needs to be something that I think is worth postponing rather than canceling, because I feel like Jordan Anderson in particular. I feel so sorry for him and his Xfinity team. I know they were very excited to launch that this year. And then at Daytona, it rains and they have no owners points. And, because there's no qualifying at the next several events, they're basically locked out until we either have qualifying again, and they can show that they have the speed, or you get a short field. So it's just a terrible situation for that team. And I think, I guess it started as part of the COVID protocols, but every other racing series right now, to my knowledge, is having full practice and qualifying like they had before the pandemic. So if they can do it, why? I'm just kind of thinking to myself, like, if they can do it, why can't NASCAR do it?
Yeah, you brought up a good point, Jordan Anderson. I know Joe and I have touched on this story recently on Grid Network, how it's totally unfair to teams like Jordan Anderson. Like imagine having your program set up and all your sponsors and everything, thinking you're going to be running full time in Xfinity, and because of practice and qualifying, you're basically blocked out until COTA in May. Yeah, and that's the next time Jordan Anderson could possibly go out and qualify for an Xfinity race. Otherwise, he's gonna need to hope we get less than 40 cars, so he can be on the entry list and get that final slot in the field, or it's just gonna be a really rough time for him. And I think Jordan was gonna be able to run mid pack because he was able to purchase, I believe, equipment from RCR, and that's definitely a huge help for a startup program. And I'm not sure when we're going to find out the negative impact of having no qualifier in terms of Jordan Anderson's program, because I'm sure he's lost a significant amount of money by sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah, it's really an unfortunate situation. I know he's not the only one. So I definitely want to see it come back soon. All right, well, Kobe, I'm going to let you go. Thank you for spending the last, not quite 2 hours with me. I feel like we've had a really good conversation. I've enjoyed getting to know you better. I'm glad to hear that you're doing well, and keep up the good work, because I think you're one of the best follows on motorsports social media. I've always enjoyed being able to go to your timeline and see the race results and updates when I can't find them anywhere else. So I appreciate that, and wish you nothing but the best going forward.
Thank you, Ben. Really appreciate you for having me on here. And before we part ways right now, I just wanted to say there's something you said to me on the day of the shoot in April 30th, 2019 that really stuck with me and really made me realize that I do have a purpose in this community, and that I can make it if I continue to work hard. I remember when you sent me a message saying that I was like one of the most, I guess the most underestimated people in this community, and you said I should have like way more followers, have way more respect in this community, because you see other people, they're able to blow up, and then I'm obviously on a much smaller level, but for you to say that, and recognize how hard I work to try to make it in the industry, and to say that people are basically sleeping on me, and that and that I deserve more. That really meant a lot to me, and I've thought about that ever since you said it. So I really appreciate you for saying it.
Yeah, thank you. I totally mean it. And I don't recall. I don't know who followed the other first. I don't recall exactly when we crossed paths online, but I've enjoyed talking about this sport and this passion that we share with you. And like I said, you're a great young writer, and you're doing great things with grid and the podium finish. And I know, hopefully when things kind of go back to normal, I hope that there's going to be some good opportunities for you out there, because you definitely deserve it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm gonna keep grinding, keep working hard, and see what happens moving forward in the future.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll see you. I'll see you soon enough, and we'll catch up again from there.
Yeah, definitely appreciate you for getting me to be on here.
All right, man. Have a good night. I'll see
You
you
too.
soon.
See you.